If dodging a yes or no question were an Olympic sport, the Treasury Secretary just won gold. Except this wasn't a game. It was $500 million in frozen housing money for families who needed it, and he still couldn't say yes or no. Congresswoman Joyce Beatty gave him 3 shots at it. He ducked every single one. So she said the 5 words that should terrify every official in Washington. "We are not going to do that with me." Then came the question that actually broke him. Who runs his own bureau? He didn't know the name. If he doesn't know that, what else about your money is he keeping from you?
I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Beatty, who is the ranking member of our National Security Subcommittee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and to the witness. First, let me start by saying that I am certainly concerned about the direction of this country, this Treasury, this administration, and this president. I believe that our democracy is under attack, as well as CFPB, the Federal Reserve, CDFIs, HUD, and the list goes on and on. So I'd like to start with a question on community development financial institutions, or CDFIs as we refer to them, which you've played a key role in economic development. As a matter of fact, in your one-page testimony, you mention economic development or growth or security almost a dozen times. You also have stated promoting economic growth and economic security is essential to ensuring financial stability. Economic growth strengthens housing, business, financial institutions, so forth and so forth. Nationwide, CDFIs finance more than 45,000 affordable homes. However, applications for CDFIs fund programs have been pending for almost 12 months or more, and except for some CDFI funds for administrative costs, none of the FY25 program funds have been allocated. Last fall, CDF funds issued a supplemental application to CDFIs to ensure that they were in compliance with the executive orders issued by the administration, but funds still have not been dispersed. Now, my question to you, are there plans to in place to release monies to CDFIs so they can continue to finance affordable housing projects? That's a yes or no. If yes, when? If no, why not?
Treasury has been working to implement the CDFI funds programs as required by law. Upon apportionment of appropriated funds, Treasury will be
Is this going to be a yes or no?
Outstanding program awards.
Mr. Secretary,
No.
I'm going to abide by the chairman's rules, but I have some rules. You can say yes or no, and then if you say yes, you may continue to give that support. If it's a no, then you tell me why not. And now we need to be clear. Yes, let's start with the yes or no. I'm trying to be respectful, but you're not going to do what you want to do on my time. Yes or no, or you can say I'm not going to answer it, and I'll move on.
Number 3.
Okay, so let the record show that he refuses to answer a question. No, we're not going to do that with me. We are not going to do that with me.
Ask
It's the gentlewoman's time from Ohio.
Now, you opted for number 3, so you get to hear my wrath that you refuse to answer a question under your authority and what this administration, and yet you've talked about the value of housing, and you're not releasing the funds, and I want the record to be clear on that. So let me move on. Mr. Secretary, I've asked you, as your predecessors, Democrats or Republican, Jack Lew, Mnuchin, Janet Yellen, and you a year ago, about putting Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. We started this process in 2020. At that time, Jack Lew said it would take 4 years. I sent you a letter. Do you know what your response was to me?
I haven't seen the letter, ma'am.
Well, you answered the letter. So now I was given a chance to help you. You responded to my letter just recently, because you know I drilled you on this. But now you responded to tell me in a few words, it's a complex process. So that's not really an answer. We know it's a complex process. Your Republican predecessor said the same thing, but he went on to support it. So it was supported by 3 people before you. It was scheduled for 2020. Then it got backlogged, because it's a complex process, to 2028. The last Republican said we would be on target to do this. So now, my question to you is, why is it not on target? And why are you not engaged in this process? Part 1. Part 2, do you know who is over the department or the Bureau of Engraving and Printing? Do you know who that person is?
Sorry?
Do you know who is over the Bureau of Engraving and Printing?
I am.
You run it?
The Treasury
You run it?
The Treasury Secretary.
Be careful now.
Treasury
Do you run the Bureau?
Gentlelady's time has
Then
expired.
let me ask him to put it in writing, because he doesn't run
Mr.
it.
Chair-
It's appointed by him, and it's Patricia Collins. So let the record show that he was incompetent in answering the question.
Gentlelady's time has
Now I
expired, and
yield.
I invite the Secretary to respond to your detailed question about, that you proposed on the bill in writing. And I now call on
I sat through this exchange twice before I let myself write about it, because the first time I was too angry to think clearly. A sitting cabinet secretary was asked one plain question 3 separate times under oath, and he refused to answer it. That single refusal tells you almost everything you need to know about where accountability actually stands in Washington right now. Let me set the scene, because the details matter more than the shouting. Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, the ranking member of the Financial Services Committee's National Security Subcommittee, was questioning Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent about something most Americans have never heard of, something called CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions. These are the lenders who finance affordable housing in the neighborhoods big banks won't touch. Nationwide, they have helped finance more than 45,000 affordable homes. And right now, applications for their funding have been sitting untouched for close to a year. Beatty asked a simple question. Is there a plan to release that money? Yes or no? Bessent tried to answer with a bureaucratic phrase about appropriations and apportionment. She cut him off, and I want you to understand why that mattered, because it wasn't rudeness, it was recognition. Vague procedural language is one of the oldest tools in Washington for avoiding accountability without technically lying. So I went and looked up what apportionment actually means, because it's one of those words designed to sound official while explaining nothing. Under Title 31 of the U.S. Code, once Congress appropriates money, the Office of Management and Budget has to release it in stages before an agency can spend it. That step exists so agencies don't blow through an entire year's budget in the first month. It was never meant to let a cabinet department sit on funds for a year with no public timeline, and there's actually a law written specifically to stop what this looks like. The Impoundment Control Act of 1974 exists because Congress got tired of the executive branch quietly freezing money it had already approved. So when Bessent says upon apportionment, what he's really saying in plain English is the check is processing, while 45,000 homes worth of housing partners wait on a promise with no due date. When you can't get a direct answer to a direct question, you're not looking at confusion. You're looking at strategy. A cabinet official who won't say yes or no to a factual question about his own department isn't protecting a process. He's protecting himself from being pinned to a timeline. And once a witness realizes that vagueness has no cost, vagueness becomes the default answer to everything. Behind every one of those stalled applications is a housing developer who can't break ground, a family on a waiting list, a nonprofit lender trying to make payroll while it waits on the federal government to do what the law already told it to do. Delay isn't neutral. Delay is a policy outcome. When you sit on congressionally approved funding for a year, you are choosing, in effect, to deprioritize the people that funding was meant to reach. Then Beatty pivoted, and this is where the hearing became something closer to a case study in institutional memory. She raised the effort to put Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill, a process that started back in 2020 that a Republican Treasury Secretary before Bessent had continued to support, and that had already slipped once, to a target date of 2028, a date that, by Treasury's own account, is still far from guaranteed. Bessent's written response called it a complex process. That phrase is true, and it's also nothing. It answers no question while sounding like it answered one. Beatty pointed out that 3 Treasury secretaries before him, across 2 administrations, had already agreed the redesign should move forward, so the complexity isn't new. What's new is the willingness to keep it stalled without explanation. And then came the moment that, if you only remember one part of this exchange, should be this one. Beatty asked him directly, "Do you know who runs the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, the very office inside his own department responsible for actually printing currency?" He didn't know. For the record, her office named the answer afterward. It's Patricia Collins. Bessent, the man she reports to, couldn't say it himself in real time, under oath. I want to sit with that for a second because it's easy to let it pass as a gotcha moment, and it's so much more than that. The Treasury Secretary doesn't need to know every employee in his department, but the person overseeing the agency at the center of the very policy question he was just being pressed on, that's not a trivia detail. That's the chain of command. Not knowing that name, in that moment, wasn't a small slip. It was evidence that the process he kept calling complex might also be a process nobody at the top is actually managing. Oversight only works when officials believe vague answers carry a cost, that a paper trail follows them out of the room, and that "I'll get back to you" is a promise, not an exit. When cabinet officials learn they can decline to answer basic factual questions with no real consequence, the incentive structure inverts. Transparency becomes optional, and evasion becomes a rational strategy instead of a scandal. That's not a partisan claim, it's a structural one. It's about whether the people spending public money can be made to explain themselves to the people who authorized that spending. And once that expectation weakens, it weakens for everyone downstream too. Career staff watch how their leadership handles hard questions, and they learn what kind of answers are acceptable. If evasive non-answers work at the top, why would anyone below that level feel obligated to do better? There's a reason Beatty made the record explicit, saying clearly and on camera that the secretary had refused to answer. Because that record is the accountability, not a punishment in the room, but a documented fact that outlives the hearing, that reporters can cite, that voters can weigh, that future oversight can build on. So what's the lesson here, if there is one? Accountability isn't a single dramatic gotcha. It's the accumulation of small, specific, factual questions that force people in power to either answer honestly or be shown on the record choosing not to. Beatty didn't need a viral soundbite. She needed 3 chances, a clear yes or no framework, and the patience to let the refusal speak for itself. That's a template that relies on precision, not outrage. The families waiting on frozen housing funds don't need a viral moment. They need dispersed money. The people waiting on a currency redesign that has already slipped from 2020 toward a still uncertain 2028 don't need a hashtag. They need a straight answer about why. And the rest of us, watching from outside that hearing room, need to understand this is what accountability looks like when it's working, even in its most frustrating, incomplete form. It's not always a collapse. Sometimes it's just a refusal to let evasion pass as an answer. If this stayed with you the way it stayed with me, don't let it end here. Look up whether your own representative sits on a committee like this one. Ask them, in writing, why money Congress already approved is still sitting untouched a year later, because that question belongs to you too, not just to Congress. And on the record, so does the answer.